The land had amply fed the Micronesian people for centuries. But the Japanese government was determined to find ways that the land could provide cash exports too. If sugar was such a success, why not other crops as well? The government built an agricultural station on Pohnpei in the mid-1920s that soon became world famous for the variety of crops it was growing. Small experimental farms were started in Yap, Chuuk, and Jalawat as well. But nowhere did these agricultural efforts flourish more than in Palau. Beginning in 1926, the administration invited Japanese families to Palau, provided them with tracts of land in Babeldaub, and encouraged them to grow vegetables for export as well as for local consumption.
The actual agricultural development in Babeldaub started when these Japanese were brought in. There was a Yamatomura in Ngatpang, one colony of Japanese farmers. And then there was Asahimura in Ngarmlungui. They started to cultivate coffee and cacao.
Before long, a few of these farming communities abandoned vegetables in favor of a single crop, pineapple. As pineapple production increased, the Japanese built a canning factory, and then another.
Pineapple, especially pineapple, something that they can export or use it themselves. There was a cannery in Ngarmlungui. That was where the biggest cannery was there.
By the end of the 1930s, there were 5 small settlements of Japanese farmers and their families on Babeldaub. In all, 300 Japanese farming families made their living in Palau. Still other families moved in after 1938, when a Japanese company began mining operations for bauxite in 2 remote areas of Babeldaub.
Yeah, bauxite was mined in Ngarmlungui and Ngartmao. The bauxite was right on the surface of hills. So they just go and terrace it and mine them. And then there was a thriving village or a town in Ngartmao with a Japanese school. Even the school was built there.
Meanwhile, Koror, now that it was the capital of the Japanese Mandate, was also being transformed into a modern port town. The Koror of 1920, as one newly arrived Jesuit priest described it, was no more than a rustic village.
If you could imagine a pretty park 2 kilometers long, divided by a single wide road, with 42 houses scattered under the palm trees, you would have an idea of Koror. Father in the Les Uliera, 1922.
By the end of that year, the transformation of Koror was already underway. The Japanese put up a double-winged administration building that would serve as the Nanyo-cho headquarters. At the other end of town, a team of laborers was putting up 300 housing units for Japanese government employees and their families.
It was a bustling town from maybe the mid-20s on to the war. Today's courthouse or judiciary building was the location of the Palau local government. There was a post office, there were shops, there was a department store.
Well, color, when I was young, they were stores that for materials, for all kinds of clothing. They were all different kind of stores.
Palauans remember they could walk through the town from building to building because they had eaves and you wouldn't get wet during a heavy rain. So it was a very impressive little town.
Karora's growth was further spurred when it became a resort for Japanese pearl divers during the late 1920s. The divers, who worked off ships in the Arafura Sea off New Guinea, spent the winter months in Karora. They came with money to spend and a thirst for excitement.
And when they come, you know, they have a load of mother of pearl and give it to Mikimoto, and they had their rest here. They had all kinds of nice place to go here. There were a drinking place, geisha house. They're more like a prostitution house, but they were all over. That's a geisha lane.
All the while, Karora continued to grow. By the end of the 1930s, there were about 15,000 Japanese living in and around the town. With its dozens of government buildings and hundreds of stores, Karora had become a genuine city. What was life like in Karora in the 1930s?
Every turn is Japanese. There were more Japanese than Palauans.
I don't think there was much integration. And frequently, Palauans will tell you, yes, we were second-class citizens, and there was no doubt about it. We were tomin, which the term used for islanders, it had this negative connotation to it.
Taxi service was here, bus service was here. More bicycles were here than cars. Everybody would.
Maktobras yak langar ore rahman deungi laki ngararat. Petoka omaral ngarar sekati ngarat dan mon mo kiri laku mangai. Namun tidak sekati ngarat.
Kulur heda kuare hatian heda kuare detial erak. Jadi gini tak mah tebelok yang hakim Arab el ang ekmal masubong ang mok el sel atal sa kontrol mora sebadonga kikmal banget mok mam alwai sel. Asa dia aki sel pol profesi ya aki mungkin el an kim lek mungkin telam nar heda kuare. Milit mo sel tiu klok aki mo mangharame. Saya mal ko tangar babal so mama tar makem sensa imor balato ngarnya au mori ai kangar rom ra adio kang malake muti ai ke gitu mori.
Palauans may have been no more than spectators in the economic miracle that had transformed their islands, but they applauded loudly from the sidelines.